Hey, Nathan.
Hey, Mr. Lowen, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty good.
We're good.
Number 7493.
7493.
Yeah, from your Spartan race. That was your head.
Yes, that is true. I got to figure out how to change that.
Yeah. Or
Start video.
There you go.
There I am.
Now it's the normal you.
Exactly.
So where are you at?
I am. Do you remember that park we were at where we met in Castle Rock?
Yep.
I'm inside of that big building.
Oh,
so I had no idea what the internet was going to be like here, or quite frankly, I didn't remember how good the internet was here the last time I was here. So
gotcha.
I knew it was good enough to check text messages and email, but I had no idea if it would hold a video call or not. So we'll see.
Yeah. Ready or not, here we go. Hey, Josh.
Exactly.
What's up?
Your beard's looking bigger.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I trimmed it recently.
Making it grow faster.
Maybe. You never know. If you guys hear the Frozen soundtrack on in the background, it's because my daughter's watching Frozen.
As she should be.
It's a great way to keep them distracted.
It is. It is a great way.
Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, man?
Doing good. Glad to be done with that whole meeting. That was a long day. 8:30 to 5, nonstop.
I don't want to get any information you're just going to share with everyone, but how did it go?
It went really, really well. Yeah, I mean, I'll dive into it more as everyone else gets on. With the caveat that it was all discussion.
Yeah.
And some of the recommendations actually need like board approval. Some of it just need more time to digest and figure out what are actually decisions, what were good ideas. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely really a good, healthy conversation. Very glad that Jim was there because there were definitely some pre-existing like policies or decisions that have been made that he was like, wait a minute, just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean you should continue to do it that way. So it was good for him to be able to say that because sometimes when I say that, it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
Perception that I'm just pushing my agenda versus actually looking at what's best. So
Does sound pretty self-serving.
yeah,
It's hard to get past that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the speed of trust, man.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Well, and when you got Greg and Deb who've been doing this together for 25 years, and when they're on the same page, and I've only been here for 3 years, but they've been working with Jim for 15 years, so he knows the organization very, very well, and seen us through lots of highs and lots of lows. I wonder if Tyree's going to jump back on here. He made me really nervous. I was like second guessing myself. Like went back and had to check all the emails and.
Well, me and Jeff decided that time across the world should just be the same, and then you should just figure out, what that time means for you.
Yeah.
What time it actually is?
Yeah. So obviously, Central Time would be, it's Central, so it would make the most sense.
For the whole world.
I mean, not everyone lives in the mountains or on the Pacific.
But you see, Central is actually more exclusive than anything else because you have to be at the center of something. And there's not everybody's at the center of their country or the center of, there's a lot of that's just going to be open up to a lot of misinterpretation.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is we're still in the same place we have.
So Eastern would work because you're always east of something. Right?
That is true.
Tyree, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I won't be able to stay on the call long. I'm going somewhere with my son.
Okay.
Well, that's somewhere to the Black Panther movie.
Right.
Yeah,
Good movie.
I thought the call was at 3 o'clock, man.
Yeah. That's what we were talking
Even,
about. You just,
yeah, even in my emails, I was like, I'm only good till 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. I look back and I'm like, oh, the time wasn't 1 p.m. It was 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
yeah.
So
Me and Jeff were laughing because, yeah, besides your initial comment, Jason, like it felt like it was never confirmed that we were actually doing it, you know? So anyway.
but it sounded like we were doing it at 1 Eastern, at 1 Mountain Standard Time.
No, it wasn't. He changed the time to 2.
Oh, yeah, I saw the change time on the email when I looked back.
All right. Well,
It's got pretty windy out.
yeah. I'll just kind of jump in. I know. I think most of the rest of the. And
All right.
sorry for you.
All right, yeah, so I'm good probably for that like 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I was just gonna give kind of an update on where stuff's at with, like, based on the conversation yesterday. Terry mentioned some of the stuff is gonna require board approval. Nathan, I'm gonna mute you. There you go. And then some of it is just going to require more conversation. So obviously take all this stuff with a grain of salt, and certainly stuff for you guys to be praying about and continuing to process and think about how it's going to impact all of our lives moving forward. So one of the proposals that I had made was to switch from one national retreat to 4 regional retreats. And Greg's response was, Jason, we hardly had the margin to do 1 retreat well this year. How are we going to do 4? But that led into a much larger conversation about, like, just the purpose of the retreat, like what would we want it to accomplish, and then how can we, because the relational equity side of the retreat that our group has come to really love, was definitely lacking this year. So how can we try and improve that without losing, like, the national movement feel of things? So, and then thinking about, like, should it be bigger than what it has been? And I don't just mean size, I mean in scope. So it looks like, again, this is going to require a lot more conversation and stuff to figure out. So 2018, the retreat's going to be very similar to what it has been. We're still working out the details. We're talking about possibly, because a lot of guys had to fly in on Sunday anyways, but we made you pay for your own hotel room. So we're talking about maybe that we have you guys still come in on Sunday, but then we pay for accommodations Sunday night, maybe even driving everyone up to the mountains kind of as you guys get there on Sunday. Maybe have like 4 or 5 shuttles going, just depending on arrival times, and leave Sunday wide open, so that whatever time you get there, you can just, sign up for a shuttle and get a ride up there. So, and then the program could actually start maybe even a little bit earlier on Monday. Give us a little bit more time, because that was, I think, part of the issue is we cut a day and tried to cram just as much material in with 1 day less, and tried to have that relational time, and that got lost. So if we have a little bit more time because we've sent up there earlier, that would help. So anyways, then for the next year, instead of having the retreat be exclusively for certified trainers, we had started talking about, what if we were to open it up to the larger gospel advancing community? So for, like, the youth pastors that you guys have been coaching, and even for, the people that have, raised their hand, signed up to be a gospel advancing ministry and aren't necessarily connected to anyone. I'm sure you guys have heard the churn about, youth specialties and Simply Youth Ministry, and just how those big conferences are soon to be going away. So talking about, well, what if there was a kind of a larger gospel advancing conference, and inviting partners in, like giving Sun Life, like a spot in there. And we have, Word of Life and AG, we have some big denominational partners as well as other parachurch organizations. So making it like a bigger, like, partnership type event, as well as, for a larger audience as well, which I think is a super cool idea. And then that led us to kind of in the conversation saying, well, doing 4 regional retreats that as an organization we plan may not be the best use of our time, energy, and money, just because it would take a lot of all of them to do them well. But what if you guys as master trainers were equipped and funded to pull together regional gatherings of some sort? Like this last year, Selby pulled together, the CTs he's overseeing, some of them, and then the youth pastors he's overseeing, and they all met at a campground in Arkansas. And it was fairly informal, a lot of great training opportunities, but really built really around like the retreat model of our first couple of years. So what if you guys as master trainers were equipped and resourced to do that? And then my main role then shifts from overseeing the program as a whole, although I still do that, but to really hone in and focus on helping to support, encourage, offer training, for the master trainer group of people, for you guys. So part of what we saw in that CT Insight doc was when the CT program is not in front of us, we forget about it, which is understandable. I get that. Everyone's busy, got other jobs that actually pay the bills and stuff like that. So seeing that some of the breakdown of the relational quality of the program has in large part to do with my lack of ability or failure to continue developing the relationship with you guys, because the stronger that we are, then the stronger that your relationship with the CTs you're overseeing is going to be. So if my role can really be to help provide the ongoing support and encouragement for you guys, that would really help. And then that conversation shifted to, but is that something that with all the other things I have going on that I can really effectively do that? And should it just be me? And so then we started talking about, well, what about the idea, there's been several of you guys as master trainers that the Lord has strategically shifted to positions where you now have margin to do more, meaning you don't have a full-time ministry job that's tying you down. Like Tyree and Jeff, you guys are 2 great examples of that. Josh, you're kind of doing something very similar with Sun Life. So what if we were to, as an organization, begin looking at kind of like Sun Life's model or NNYM, maybe hiring on a part-time basis a couple master trainers? So we started talking about that, like to have you guys help oversee, kind of the different regional groups, so that I wasn't trying to figure this out all on my own, but kind of had, a leadership team to help guide the movement from that standpoint. So we started talking about that. What was really interesting was Deb's initial reaction when I brought up the idea of field staff was, oh man, we have a policy that we will never hire field staff. And our consultant, Jim, was like, okay, but just because that's the way you've always done it, does that mean that's the way you should continue to do it? And then the follow-up question that he asked was, why? Why is this policy in place? Come to find out that about 15 years ago, they tried doing a field staff, had someone on staff somewhere else in the country, and this person was a miserable failure, not necessarily of a person, but with their role. I have no idea who it was, and I don't really care to know, but they just did not do a good job and left a horrible taste, obviously, in the exec's mouth, to the extent that they apparently wrote a policy that they won't ever do this again. Now, granted, 15 years ago, we didn't have this sort of technology. It was like rotary phones or something, you had to, put it on the Pony Express just to communicate. So things have certainly changed. I actually, Gustavo, I don't know if you saw, he sent in the feedback that I was asking from you guys, Gustavo sent some feedback, and with that sent a link to a podcast where this guy was interviewing someone from Belay Solutions, who they have less than 100 employees, and in the last couple of years, I'm not sure when it was released, but the year before that this podcast was released, they were listed by some business magazine as the company of that size with the #1 company culture in the country, and they don't have an office. None of their employees have an office. They have like 65 employees. And he was basically saying, and Jim echoed this as well as on the podcast, said, listen, this isn't, remote work is not the wave of the future, it's the wave of today. And, having brick and mortar is like an old school style of leadership that is quickly going away. So he really, and Jim's older than both Deb and Greg. So, it was really encouraging to have him say, you need to readdress this. So definitely super encouraged by that. Basically where we landed with the staff MT position was that it will likely be like an experimental season, which obviously makes it a little bit riskier for those of you that might be interested in applying for that. Tyree, I was specifically thinking of you. If you apply for it and then the execs say that they didn't like the experiment, I'd hate to see you quit your job only to have this job.
Yeah, my wife is wiser than that.
Yeah.
She's smarter than that.
But so I'm going to be working on trying to figure out kind of the high level objectives and kind of a job description for that. We didn't really talk too much about a financial model. I'm proposing like a 10 to 15 hours a week, like hire 3 MTs, staff MTs, and 10 to 15 hours a week, and have it be like a 3-month contract or month to month or something like that, just to get things through, because that change would actually require board approval to get that changed. But they have a call sometime this month, so you can be praying for that. That Deb said she's going to bring it up to the board. At least she said that in the meeting. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But she said in the meeting she's going to bring it up to the board about requesting that we could do, an experimental, trial run of this before we, make any final decisions. So, I think that is mostly it. That was obviously a very, that was a 4-minute run through of a 8-hour meeting. But Tyree, I know you're going to head off to a pretty awesome movie. Did you have any quick questions before you
go? No, obviously, if that's the role of that staff MT out, whatever that is, I do like that limit of 15 hours.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was even talking to my wife about a long time ago was just like the drainage of ministry and how it's a 24/7 job, and not be like sucked back into that.
Yeah.
Which also, it continues to give me the heart for the average youth pastor because of that 24/7 grind, which then is all the more reason for the CT program and the MT program to position people to help those youth pastors that are just in that grind, like chisel off things that they don't need, focus on how to be more gospel advancing in the midst of the politics of their own church. So yeah, my heart's really been broken for the youth pastors that are just overwhelmed to keep their head above water. So busy that they know they need training, but too busy that they can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, but that's it.
I agree. I have something to add to Tyree's statement. My one thought is being in not too dissimilar of a role that you're talking about. I would say, creating for those 15 hours very distinct and clear goals. You know what I mean? And this is how we would want you to spend those 15 hours. Just because, again, as master, if you're getting a master trainer, the idea is, that obviously a lot of the things that you're going to be asking of them would be above and beyond like the already master trainer type things, and so again, just I think what would help someone in that position, I think, would be clearly like, hey, this is what we're asking you to do with these 15 hours, and that's that's why we're bringing you on for this role. So,
yeah.
Which again, I feel like Dare to Share has helped me to make sure I do that, in a lot of areas of my life, clearly define expectations and roles and stuff. So just
yeah, and one of the things that I'm working on with Jack, who now reports to me, and then with this role, it was interesting because in the podcast I was listening to that Gustavo sent, one of the things they said in there that makes remote work possible and effective is instead of asking for a certain number of activities to be done, you say, here you have outcomes. Here you do, whether it's 10 to 15 or it might take you 40 hours or it could take you 30 minutes. Here's the outcomes for this week that we want accomplished. You have some agreed upon outcomes for a given week, and you just go and get it done. And one of the examples they said is, if I were to ask my assistant, hey, set me up a meeting with so-and-so, and I need to have it for some time in these 3 days. And, the assistant's like, hey, I called and I emailed and I sent, 25 text messages. Well, when's the meeting? Well, they didn't respond. Like, well, okay, get me my meeting set up. If that means you have to fly to Philadelphia to schedule a meeting, like, you go do that, get it done. Like, the outcome is what is important, not the activity. And so, yeah, to what you're saying, Josh, like that, from my perspective, providing leadership for Jack, and then, if this happens, then providing leadership for, the staff MT would be similar sort of thing. Like, let's define the outcomes that we would want from, a quarter, from a month, from a week, and then, make sure they're agreed upon and reasonable, and not, because sometimes, as you guys know, Dare to Share has unreasonable expectations. So that, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. So
this call is being recorded.
yeah, but
I'm joking.
it's like a common truth.
No, I mean, y'all bold vision. Like, y'all created like the thought of the bold vision. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and with that, one of the other things, last thing that I'll mention that we spent a lot of time talking about was the idea of being Catholic at the top, Buddhist at the bottom. And during that conversation, I did bring up to our consultant the picture of Greg, which he thought was awesome, Pope Greg. So, but the question that I posed to the execs and to Jim is, we say Catholic at the top, but we never define what the top is. And this kind of, Jeff, goes back to a comment you made to me a while back. And you said, Jason, this movement is way too massive for it to function well from one small office in Arvada. And that's really like helped to inform some of my thought processes. I've been kind of working through this. Now, you think about it even architecturally, right? Like, you have one main point that everything scales from. Like, an inverted triangle will topple over. Architecture doesn't make sense. Same with, like, any sort of leadership structure. And there needs to be some additional pillars for that, which means there needs to be some additional structure that, like, the Catholic needs to be further down than just like me and Greg and Mark as the ones who define and hold what the integrity of the movement. Like, it has to be bigger than that. So that question wasn't necessarily answered, but I'm pushing that top is like pushed all the way down to the master trainer level, and even into some of the certified trainer level, which we did talk too about what does it mean to be a certified trainer, and saying, okay, really liked, I think it was Chris's recommendation that you have to replicate, like, you have to train someone to be gospel advancing before you're qualified to be a CT. And then Greg said too, he said, we really need to like recalibrate, like when a new CT or when a CT is candidating for the position, they have to, we still expect them to submit some sort of a sample of them teaching, but dialing in what we're looking for and having some sort of like a standardized evaluation form, so that as you guys as master trainers are watching, or even certified trainers, if we have them do it, as we're watching one of these sample candidating videos, like, we're scoring them on 5 or 6 or 7 kind of key principles. The idea being, we want to make sure we have the right people in this seat on the bus. Whereas, previously, really the only qualification to be a CT was you had to be a gospel advancing ministry. But if you're going to be one of the leaders and the gatekeepers of this movement, kind of part of that top Catholic section, then you have to be able to train effectively. And you have to have demonstrated that you're a disciple multiplier, right? Like, if you're not doing that yourself, and certainly we mean that from the like discipleship standpoint, the way that Sun Life would define it, but also the discipleship standpoint of like multiplying yourself within the gospel advancing movement, kind of a both and. So that's getting reworked. I kind of put some of those thoughts down and sending those up to the exec. So that in 21 minutes is what we talked about for 8.5 hours. Kind of the high level conclusions of where we landed.
Wow. That's wow, you guys are really giving a lot of Catholicism away, man.
Trying. So now you guys want it to be like popes or at least like, bishops or cardinals or something.
Choir boys.
Yeah. No, that's the CTs. You guys are a little higher than that.
I don't know anything else for that.
Oh, so good.
I've exhausted my knowledge.
So I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are about the shift into like a national conference for gospel advancing ministry, and then focusing more on the regional gatherings, and kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Well, my first question would be, and the one that I'd want answered is what do you mean by resourcing us? And two, what kind of authority is that going to look like? And I don't need an answer today, but what kind of authority does that give us as master trainers to push these guys to show up to our regional gatherings? Because, like with my group, 40% of my guys are on every call we have, and the other 60%, one of them talks to me over phone fairly frequently, but the other two I've not got a lot of contact with. So one of the things that I would say is, if we're going to be doing something like this, that the master trainer that's over any new person coming into the program, the master trainer that will be over them needs to help approve them coming in, so that there's an authority set up to go with that, to give that guy an understanding of, oh yeah, I'm not just going straight to Jason or Greg, but I'm going to Nathan or to Jeff or to fill in the blank, so that we could create a little bit more momentum going into a regional event like that.
Yeah.
Which I think would be pretty huge.
I like that. That's a fantastic idea, Nathan. So backing up a little bit to your resourcing question, what I'm going to propose is that the Gospel Advancing Conference is not paid for out of the CT fees, but rather so if it's like a $300 entrance fee, like CTs and maybe master trainers go free, or if you're a speaker, you get in free, but like CTs who are not on the leadership team maybe get like 50% off. But then the monies that, so it's like about $275-ish that we actually take from the fee and put into all the different expenses of the retreat, and so allocate that and say, all right, Nathan, if you have 6 guys in let's just say 10 because it's a round number. You have 10 guys that you're overseeing, then you would have access to $2,750. So 275 times 10. And you would have access to that to utilize that for your regional gatherings. And so then you would then have the freedom to develop the strategy for how you want to invest in your group. Whether that's like what Selby did and do like a retreat, or maybe you just want to invite everyone over to your guys' house for steaks, 7 or 8 times a year. It's a lot of good quality steaks, just saying. But the thought behind that was that way you guys have some resources to be able to invest back into your group. So that's what I'm proposing. Again, this is all needs further discussion. And on top of that, we're also reevaluating when this conference might be, because the first week of December is not fantastic. We obviously got rid of all of our spring conferences, and that's typically when conferences happen. So we're talking about, what if we were to push this Gospel Advancing Conference to March or April. But then if we do that, then the 2019 CT retreat or Gospel Advancing Conference would be 3 months after the retreat. So if we do something in the spring, we'd probably push it to 2020 and actually give us substantial time and if we disconnect the CT fee from the retreat conference thing, then the monies are still there for you guys to do what you need to do to develop your tribe, without it feeling like, oh man, we missed a retreat year. So does that help answer some of your questions, at least as far as what I'm thinking?
And then another question, would that conference, it would just be my question is, would it be an expectation all CTs need to be at the conference, sort of a thing?
I think Greg would like to make it as much of an expectation as possible.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking, man, if we were able to offer 50% off or something to where we could get it as scholarshiped as possible, maybe even get it free if we're able to raise some funds for it. But the hope would be that it's one of those things where you don't want to miss this. We're bringing in key leaders from around the world, kind of like the GYI. Man, I got an invite to this. This is incredible. Of course I'm going to go. Especially if the cost is reasonable, And I think if we were in a place like Chicago where easier to find a Motel 6 at $29 a night versus like you come here and you try and find a hotel and it's like, great, I'm spending, minimum of like $150 a night just to find a reasonable hotel. So
yeah, I think all the invites should be sent out on a golden Willy Wonka ticket.
ooh, inside a candy bar.
For one, and second thought is maybe when they come, they get like a reimbursement back from what they paid in. So that, and like have that be the incentive instead of like half off. Like initially, maybe they still pay that rate, and then as they come, they receive a check back half of it as a bigger incentive to show up.
Yeah, I like that. Or maybe give them like lead the cause credit or something.
Lead the cause. Yeah, because lead the cause credit. That's really going to hurt you guys as bad as like a solid 50% check.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get lead the cause credit. Lead the cause cash.
Yeah.
Or maybe their way to lead the cause. No, it starts at 4:30, but we know them credits are about 20 minutes long.
Yes, we do.
But we're walking in now. All right, guys.
Thanks, brother.
All right.
You guys have any other thoughts or questions? I mean, obviously this is all pretty new, but
I think my biggest concern is just that there's definitely a level of consistency from retreat to retreat. I think that would be a little bit of a challenge potentially. And some of the things I hear you saying is that it could be that the East Coast retreat is so different from the West Coast retreat. I think that would be a negative. I mean, obviously they could have a...
We're not necessarily saying that it has to be a retreat. What we're saying is, hey, here's some funds to develop the relational equity of your tribe. Do with it as you see, And so, as I said, like it could be, so then you get the freedom to develop whatever strategy, you feel like is best. The challenge, I think the one thing that would be a big drawback would be that we would lose the time with like the execs. And that's, I think, having proximity to Greg and Zane and, even Deb and Phil, as a certified trainer coming in, I got like a whole week with these guys. But yet at the same time, like this movement is growing big and fast, and there has to be some, we have to be willing to adapt and change. So it's, I hear you that the inconsistency of what that would look like, but from my perspective, what I think could be a pro, a benefit that could outweigh that would be the fact that you guys as master trainers get the freedom to develop your tribe how you see is best for the people there, which obviously, and like Nathan, for you got people all the way on the West Coast and you're here in Denver. So there's going to be we're going to have to figure some of that stuff out. Jeff, sorry, I interrupted.
Well, and that was exactly kind of, so I was sitting and wondering about, and almost looking at it kind of like from the Jeff, if we had, like a retreat in a box type deal, we're saying these are the 5 points we want covered. And, Mr. Bill and Nathan, you guys are going to meet everybody in Portland, or whatever the case may be. I think that there could be some validity in that because it would keep the message unified, but that would definitely be not quite the way you just presented that either, though.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe it's like this year we want to cover these pieces of training and then give you guys the freedom to design your training schedule however you want. That type of thing. I like that idea. Jeff, did you have something else you wanted to say? I totally interrupted you. Apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think that's the biggest piece is just that there is a level of consistency and it's not some crazy. I mean, I'm a YWAMer, so YWAM bases are so autonomous, and one person can go to YWAM Tampa, for instance, and have just an absolutely miserable experience. And the next person goes to YWAM Louisville and they have the most amazing experience. And then these two people come together and they're talking about, well, my experience was terrible. My experience was awesome. And the only thing similar about their experience is they were both supposedly YWAM. But the reality is those experiences are not even close to one another. And I would be afraid of the Dare to Share and the gospel advancing, becoming something in name only, and not really, like, we shouldn't have that where two people talk about their experience at the retreat or as a CT or whatever, and their experience is so night and day different from one another. But I like what Nathan was talking about. If you have those 5 points, and somebody else I think mentioned this idea of like the master trainers maybe having the retreat and Colorado, and then really going out from there, so that there is at least the Kevin Bacon thing. How many times does it take before you can get to an exec? I can get to an exec in 2 people, or like something like that, so that the philosophy and the main crux of the experience isn't lost or so different.
Yeah, Jeff, that's exactly what as you started talking about that issue, that where you were going was, I was reminded of that idea that was presented somewhere, to have some sort of a master trainer retreat. And then even,
It was Andy.
Andy, okay. And then he's always looking for a way to get something out of us. Gosh. I love you, Andy. But using that then as an opportunity for, man, are you guys seeing me totally blacked out? Totally looks like one of those police videos. But using then that retreat then to say, okay, what are those 5 trainings? And let's develop some consistency of our messaging. And I think if we were to do something like that in conjunction with having, 2 or 3 staff MTs, and my role being, really much more focused and being freed up to spend more time with you guys, bringing the Catholic all the way down through the MT level, I think, Jeff, that would really go a long ways to avoiding the discrepancies of a certified trainer's experience. Because I think, I think we're seeing that already, that like Nathan, you've met with or had attempts to meet with, the CTs that are in your tribe, that are in your group on several times now. I got a message from Mike Mowers saying he didn't even know he had a master trainer over him. So, I had to reach out to Mr. Aaron Bolduc and be like, dude, give this guy a call. Like, what the heck? So I think that, I think if that was able to be addressed, I think those couple of things could really help to keep the program tight.
I have, Jason, I don't know if we've talked about this or not. I know I formulated a text, but I don't know that I actually sent it. I've had similar situations to what Nathan's talking about, where there are some CTs that are really like invested, and then others in my group that's like, are they still alive? Should we send somebody to their house?
Yeah.
And
did you see Eric was actually on the call yesterday or on Wednesday?
I wasn't on the call yesterday, but I'm glad to hear that.
No, he was one of those guys that we're kind of concerned about. He was on the call, which I think was fantastic.
Right. But I think like when they're not, and they're consistently not, like, I think that brings down obviously the whole program. Yeah. Just like in any organization, whenever somebody's not there, and I'm not necessarily saying we need disciplinary action or anything like that. I'm not talking about bringing out a paddle necessarily, but it does seem like there should be some kind of, not just expectation, but even I have no idea what I'm talking about, but even some kind of like a reward, or like, so for instance, like my my Starbucks card, like I'm a gold member at Starbucks, obviously, and I have to buy like,
not obviously,
yeah, I have to buy like 30 like coffees or something throughout the course of the year to retain gold status. I'm there by February, which is pretty awesome. But you know what I mean? Like there has to be something like that to where I'm not saying you have to attain all these meetings to be like somebody who's advancing the gospel. But to be a part of our tribe, there has to be some kind of an expectation
Like a covenant.
and some kind of reward and punishment. I don't know. That's
More than just an expectation in name is what you're saying. You know, not just saying this is an expectation, but here's what we mean by that. You know, if you don't make any call this year, you're not going to be a CT next year. You know what I mean? Like I don't. Again, because there's nothing. You know, as far as like, again, reward consequences. If you want to put it that way, you know, it's ambiguous to whether or not, you know. Again, expectation is just an expectation unless something's attached to that, I think.
There's some teeth to it.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably the simplest thing from a consequence standpoint is you get ousted from the program and you forfeit your CT fee. You know,
but like with my Starbucks dealio, if I were to get an email that said, "Hey, you didn't buy enough this year," I'd be like, "I knew that was a potential."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid where the CTs are at right now, I'd be like, "What? Like I paid a fee. It feels almost like college. I already paid my tuition. I can skip class if I want."
Yeah,
but that's not cool.
Yeah. I was saying,
and thus my statement of saying I think the MT needs to be involved in the onboarding of every CT in his group because, like two of my guys, they actually work near each other, and the guy that has not made a call in 18 months, or he's made one call in 18 months. The guy, he did most of the onboarding for this other guy, and he's not made a call yet since he's been a CT. And, the DNA's there. And so they need to understand that that's got to be an expectation. And I don't think this guy had any clue that was an expectation. I generally don't.
Yeah, and I think that part, when you mix up who onboards people, like I was onboarding a couple of people and I said, hey, you're going to be in so-and-so's group, and they'll let you know when their call schedule is. But if you were able to say, hey, here's when do you have any roadblocks you can see right now? All right. If not, let's commit to that. Let's get it on your calendar right now. Like part of, I like that. Good.
Yeah. I definitely feel like, the only person I've onboarded, is David, and he's in my group. And so that's like, but I definitely feel like that initial, like I remember that process, and that was the first time I had met him. But it definitely creates a connect similar to the connect I feel like that we get at the retreat. That was just my personal experience, but I totally agree with you, Nathan, that's key. I think that would be key going forward anyway.
Yeah.
And Jason, just a quick clarification. So would there need to be like I'll just call him a paid MT running those retreats? Like that would be the expectation, that those retreats would be run by like that's part of what they're doing with those hours.
Could be, but I don't know. I don't know that would be necessary to have one of the staff MTs run the retreat. But certainly like myself, Jack, Jillian, you'd have a whole team here that if you were to try and pull together some sort of a retreat, again, the way I'm phrasing it to the execs is regional gatherings. So that, hey, we're all going to get together and play Frisbee golf. Or we're gonna get together at a retreat center and hang out for 2-3 days and go over the gospel advancing training again, just to like whatever you choose to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a retreat. So I definitely don't hear that you have to do a retreat, but you would also, if you did choose to do something that was a little bit more logistically involved, you'd have a whole team of support here in the office, from myself to Jack to Jillian. the three of us. And then if there were staff master trainers, then some of their hours could be allocated for that. Just have to
Yeah. Are you familiar with what Sun Life used to do with the 2-6 groups?
No.
You bet. So they had these 2-6 groups, and I'm thinking of them because it could give you some context, but they had basically you had different options, but you had an expectation of this many hours you needed to meet basically in the course of the program. So if you wanted, some groups got together for a weekend every 3 months, and other groups got together just for a Saturday every month. But there was an expectation of like, basically it's you're committing a day per month. So again, you could go 6 months and then end up with like a 4-day, you know what I mean? Like extended retreat, if that's what worked best for you. But if there was like a clear, here's the content you need to get through, so we have that piece, but then also like, here's the time that you need to do it in, because so for instance, there's enough people right here in the Chicagoland area that we're like, hey, yeah, I mean, me, David, and Nick have started to get together in person just because we're like, well, I can drive 45 minutes, you drive 45 minutes, and then we're there, and it's so much better in person, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to a Zoom call. So if you created that and, some different and laid out some different options, it might be helpful as well.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea of the 2-6 group and way those options were laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hey, I gotta get going here in a minute.
Okay.
But go ahead. What were you gonna say?
My last thing was going to be about the what is it called? Conference,
Advancing thing.
Gospel Advancing Conference. You could, I just thought a very positive thing for me at the Sun Life conference was everyone who was on staff came early and we helped set up and everything like that. You could kind of make that also a piece of it. And maybe even because there's so many CTs, you could make it optional, but like, hey, this would be huge. We could really use your help coming early and then create a time, that could be a connect time with the execs, say like that night before it's just for CTs, but have that time built into the conference itself, where you have, because again, I felt totally differently this year than I did from previous years at the DCon because I was a part of that, planning and organize. And even though I was just doing work, it felt like I was a part of it, because of that. And obviously that's big for CTs.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Big for the program.
Cool. Yeah, those are some great suggestions for sure.
Guys, I got a scat. We'll see you later.
All right. Thanks, brother. Hey, see you tomorrow.
See ya.
Jeff, any last minute comments or thoughts?
It's like a slow no.
One thing that I keep thinking of, and it may or may not fit or matter, but you are talking about potentially putting some MTs on staff. You were talking about 10, 15 hours a week, something like that. And I think the biggest word of caution that I would give there, which I think you already know this, but just because somebody's good at one position doesn't mean they'll be good at another.
Yeah.
And I think especially if that's going to be in a trial period, it's so important that you get the right person. And I'm sure you know that, but that keeps going off in my mind that I'd hate to see that whole concept fail just because it was handed to somebody who was awesome at one thing, but that didn't mean they had any business trying this particular thing.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate that for sure. Yeah. We're going to create, at least my thought is create an application and work the application process and, trust the Lord and trust the process to get the right person in. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And obviously it sounds like, again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there's some skepticism, having those field persons. And I've now been at the Sun Life role for 7 months and I feel like I'm barely getting my feet wet. You know what I mean? So that sounds like a hard thing to do. Like, hey, try this out, 10 to 15 hours a week for 3 months. Like, again, I'm getting some rhythms and I'm getting there, and I have good people pouring into me who are helping me with that. But I mean, it takes time, you know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's
So
good insight.
yeah. So just a thought, as you know, I don't know what to expect from someone. You know what I mean? In 3 months, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
really think about any transition. You know, yeah. So.
Cool. No, I appreciate that insight. All right, thanks, guys. I got to run. Go meet with Phil.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah,
You
you got-
rock, man.
All right, you guys too. Thanks.
Bye.